There are moments in life when we're not hurt by what happens to us, but by how long we hold on to it in our minds. We cling to old memories, to things long gone, to mistakes, whether ours or someone else's. We call it thinking it through, or remembering to learn, or not forgetting the lesson. But the longer we hold on, the heavier it gets. The more we think about it, the more it weighs on our hearts. There's a small story set on a mountain road after the rain, where two brothers drive back to their old village, the place where their childhood lived. Not everyone grows up by avoiding mistakes. Some grow up the moment they learn to lay down what's heavy and move on. So listen closely, and if you see a part of yourself in this story, ask yourself, am I still carrying something I should have let go of a long time ago? The road curled along the mountainside, slick and soaked from the first heavy rain of the season. Clouds hung low, drifting lazily at eye level, casting a hazy gray over everything. The world outside looked blurred, still, like a half-forgotten dream. On that quiet road, an old silver car rolled steadily forward. Inside, the silence was almost sacred. Only the rhythmic swish of the wipers and a soft piano melody playing on the radio filled the space. The older brother was at the wheel, his eyes focused yet calm. He didn't say much. His posture was steady, his expression tinged with something unspoken, something quietly heavy. In the passenger seat sat his younger sister, nearly 10 years younger. Her head leaned against the window, eyes gazing distantly into the rain-soaked world beyond the glass. They were on their way back to a place they once called home, a small village tucked deep in the forest, where their grandparents had lived their entire lives. It was the place they'd grown up, chasing butterflies under the straw trees, laughing through smoky summer evenings. But ever since their grandparents passed, the visits had stopped. Maybe it was the busyness of life. Maybe it was the quiet ache of facing memories they weren't ready to relive. This trip hadn't been planned. It was sparked by a message from an old neighbor. The house was falling apart, leaking roof, cracked walls. If you don't come fix it soon, the rains will bring it down, the old woman had written. No one said it aloud, but they both knew some things can't be postponed forever. Now, on the road that once led them to childhood, the two siblings, opposite in so many ways, sat in rare silence. The brother, quiet and grounded, lived simply. He was the kind of person who helped without needing a reason. The sister, sharp and pragmatic, always weighed right and wrong before making a move. Neither spoke, yet both carried something inside. The brother carried memories, but never let them grow heavy. The sister carried questions, ones that had never found their way into words. Unanswered, unspoken, and neither of them knew. Just a few minutes ahead, a stranger by the side of the road would change everything. A simple encounter, but one that would teach them. True growth isn't about never falling. It's about knowing when to lay your burdens down and choosing to move forward. The rain had only just stopped. The ground was still wet, the pavement slick with puddles, and the mist from the forest on both sides of the road rose thick into the air. The car crept slowly around a narrow curve, where part of the road had been eaten away by a small landslide. And right there, in the middle of that curve, was a sight that made both siblings take notice. An elderly woman, slightly hunched, stood off to the side of the road. Beside her sat a large suitcase, scuffed, dirty, and with a torn handle. She didn't wave. She didn't call out for help. She just stood there, gripping the suitcase tightly, her eyes staring into the distance, as if waiting for something she no longer believed would come. The younger sister glanced at her, then looked away, her voice light but firm. "We can't stop in the middle of this mountain pass. It's too risky." The car rolled past the old woman. In the side mirror, the sister watched as she remained there, still, small, and utterly alone in the misty wilderness. But just seconds later, a soft yet decisive sound broke the silence, the brakes. The brother pulled over, turned on the hazard lights, and stepped out without a word. The sister frowned. "What are you doing? We've still got a long way to go, and it's getting dark." He didn't answer. He walked back down the road, wind tugging at his jacket, mud clinging to his shoes. He reached the woman and asked gently, "Do you need help, ma'am?" She turned to him, her eyes weary. She nodded slowly. Turns out, she had gotten off the bus at the wrong stop. The next station was more than 2 kilometers away. Her suitcase was broken. She simply couldn't carry it any farther. Without hesitation, the brother hoisted the suitcase over his shoulder and offered her his arm. Step by step, they made their way back toward the car. The door opened. The sister sat inside, clearly uneasy. You don't even know who she is. What if something goes wrong? You can't just trust people like that anymore. Sometimes, he said quietly, you have to choose what's right over what's safe. The car continued its journey. The old woman sat in the back seat, quietly thanking them, sharing bits and pieces of her life, her children, her loneliness, her unexpected detour. The brother listened. The sister stared out the window, silent. The atmosphere in the car grew heavier, not because of the woman's presence, but because something deeper was unfolding. Neither of them knew it yet, but this small moment, this simple act of compassion, would become the beginning of a deeper conversation, not between them and the stranger, but between two hearts shaped by two very different ways of seeing the world. The car kept climbing the winding slopes, leaving behind the bus stop and the elderly woman with her soft words of gratitude. For the next 10 minutes, no one spoke. Only the sound of wind slipping through the cracks in the windows and the steady hum of the engine filled the damp, chilly silence. The younger sister sat with her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the road ahead, but the calm expression she'd worn at the start of the trip was long gone. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried something tightly wound beneath it. You're always like this. The moment someone looks like they need help, you jump in without thinking. What if she wasn't who she seemed? What if it was a trap? The brother kept his hands on the wheel, eyes steady on the road. A moment passed in silence. He didn't answer right away, and somehow, that quiet made her even more frustrated. I'm not saying we shouldn't be kind, but we have to be careful. We can't make everything our responsibility. You keep doing this, and one day it's going to get you into real trouble. This time, the brother let out a slow breath, still calm. I hear you. I really do. But I also know if I see someone in need and choose to walk away, I won't be able to live with myself afterward. She frowned, her hands tightening into fists. But what about rules? Boundaries? Safety? You can't live your whole life just following your heart. Sometimes doing the good thing isn't the right thing. He smiled then, a soft, worn smile, like he'd heard this argument 100 times before. I didn't take her in. I didn't try to fix her life. I just helped her through a difficult stretch of road. Then we moved on, right on time. That's enough. She fell silent, not because she was convinced, but because she couldn't argue with the quiet certainty in his voice. Still, something unsettled lingered inside her. She couldn't understand why breaking the rules, her rules, seemed so effortless for him, and why she, who had done nothing wrong, was the one carrying all the discomfort. A while later, he spoke again, gently, as if drawing the curtain on the subject. I've helped her and left it behind, but it seems like you're still carrying it with you. The words dropped into the space between them like a stone in still water, and she, though she didn't want to admit it, felt something deep within her stir. Something real, something she hadn't looked at in a long time. The car kept moving through the forest roads, now wrapped in thick mist. Dusk had begun to fall. The last streaks of sunlight pierced through the canopy, casting slanted beams across the road. Patches of light and shadow weaving together like the tangle of emotions inside the younger sister. Since her brother's quiet remark, neither of them had spoken. But within her, a different kind of conversation was unfolding. I've left it behind, but it seems like you're still carrying it with you. That sentence echoed in her mind. Not loud, not sharp, but enough to make her chest ache. She began to wonder, why am I angry? Was it really about the broken rule? Or was it something deeper? For years, she'd lived by one core belief. Do what's right, and only what's right, and you'll be at peace. She avoided unnecessary trouble. She kept her distance from anything unclear, unpredictable, or emotional. She thought that was strength, protection. But now, she saw it differently. Maybe it was fear. Fear of being hurt. Fear of being vulnerable. And maybe in that fear, she'd lost something essential, something soft, something human. The part of her that once knew how to pause in the middle of the road, just to ask a stranger, "Do you need help?" She hadn't done anything wrong, but she hadn't done anything at all. And now, though the old woman was long gone, though the worn suitcase no longer sat in the back seat, she was the one still carrying it all, like a weight made of silence. She glanced over at her brother. His face remained calm, steady, like none of it had ever happened. He hadn't explained himself. He hadn't argued. He hadn't tried to prove he was right. He had simply done what his heart told him to do. And when it was done, he left it behind, the way someone sets a stone gently down on the side of the road, then continues walking, lighter. That's when she understood. Life doesn't ask us to carry everything with us, right or wrong. Those things only matter at the moment they happen. After that, holding on to them just makes us tired. Forgiveness isn't about excusing someone else. It's about freeing yourself. And letting go, that's not weakness. Sometimes it's the greatest courage of all, not to keep living in yesterday. She sighed softly, then rolled down the window, letting the wind rush in. Letting something go, the heaviness began to lift, like the fading mist at dusk, slowly dissolving under the touch of the setting sun. The evening light had faded completely behind them. The sky turned a soft, dusky blue-gray, and the mountains stood in solemn stillness, as if guarding an ancient secret. The car crested the final hill, descending into the small town beyond the pass, where streetlights flickered on and faint voices began to fill the narrow streets. She gazed out the window, but her mind wasn't just traveling through winding mountain roads anymore. It had gone somewhere else entirely, inward. She thought back to a memory from childhood, crossing an old suspension bridge with her brother. She had been terrified, her legs trembling with every step. He turned back, took her hand, and whispered, "Don't look down. Look ahead. You're not crossing it alone." Today they were still walking together, but this time he had stepped forward without turning back. He hadn't held her hand, hadn't comforted her. He'd simply said, "I've already left it behind, but it seems like you're still carrying it." It wasn't a criticism. It was a mirror, and for the first time, she truly saw herself in it. Growing up isn't about always being right, or being strong, or having control over everything. Sometimes growing up is knowing when to let go. Letting go of a principle that no longer serves. Letting go of a belief that only wears you down. Letting go of pride to make room for understanding. She wasn't angry at him anymore for stopping to help a stranger. In fact, she was grateful, because through that small act, she'd learned to look within. When the car pulled over beside a quiet street to rest, she turned to him and smiled, a real smile, one he hadn't seen in her for a long time. "I get it now," she said softly. "Carrying more doesn't always mean carrying the right things." He didn't reply, just nodded, but there was warmth in his eyes, glowing gently in the deepening dusk. Sometimes it takes only a small moment, like stopping to help an old woman on the side of the road, to touch the deepest part of someone's soul. Not everyone notices it right away, but when they do, it can change the way they live the rest of their life. Because growth isn't about how far we go. It's about knowing when to pause, when to release, and that is how we truly move forward. Life doesn't always give us clear answers. Sometimes the line between right and wrong is as thin as a single heartbeat. But it's not the situation itself. It's how we respond to what we feel inside that shapes who we truly become. There are things we must remember in order to grow. But there are also things that, only when we learn to forget, do we truly grow up. Learn to let go, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to understand. Not every burden is worth carrying for the rest of the road. And if one day you find your heart weighed down by things long past, remember this: you always have the power to set it down, smile, and keep walking. Thank you for listening to this story from BraveSpark channel. If it meant something to you, share it with someone who might need it too. And never forget, in a world that moves too fast, sometimes the courage to pause and let go is the very beginning of a brand new journey.